Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rajiv Singh, Managing Director of Entrust Data Card, based out of Mumbai. Today, I'm going to talk very briefly. You've heard a lot about security and different perspectives of different companies. I just want to touch upon a very simple requirement that we as a company believe very strongly and have conviction, which is trusted identities and securing transactions. So if I were to say, many years back, we just step back in India, just look at India. India was always a cash economy. There were hardly any people using ATMs and point-of-sale devices. Cards were not in use. People were not comfortable using cards. Hardly anyone went to the internet to do payments or transaction processing. But gone are the days. Things have evolved. People have come forward with financial inclusion programs. The government, last year, for example, the Jan Dhan Yojana that was launched was a massive success. A lot of people have now come into the system who are inclusive banking, is what we call as inclusive banking. So what we realized was the importance of a form factor, which could be a card, it could be a mobile, and all of this is today in the hands of the people. So you've actually got empowered people. But the card was always a laggard in growth compared to the mobile. You've seen the mobiles have always taken off much faster because it's convenient, it's interactive. While the card lacked that interactiveness. It was just a tool to do a transaction. What really goes behind that is the security, the compliances, Euromaster Visa standards that are built in, and the chip technology, the technology that makes the card secure, unique, and therefore the authentication of the consumer and the citizen. So we looked at three areas: the consumer, the citizen, and the enterprise. And this basically was a convergence of payments with information security. So I will just take a few minutes to talk about it before I hand over to my colleague Saurabh here. So what was the emerging ecosystem? It was physical and digital. On one side, you had all these documents like the passport, driver's license, national identity documents, e-governance programs which were identifying citizens and empowering them with programs from the government, social security benefits, healthcare, and also transit. So technologies always existed. But then the question was, who is the one who actually needs to use it? Who is the person who actually needs to access that technology to avail of those benefits? It really was in that space that we found a lot of specialization that goes in. For example, the passport document that you have, how secure is it? Big question. Those are areas which many countries have evolved. For example, we've done the Interpol passport. That really was like a feather in the cap because that really talked about how high the security standards can be built. For it's always that the fraudster will find a way to crack and get in. Same goes for your driver's license. If you know that there were many states in the US that actually had driver's licenses which were faked. There were fake driver's licenses floating around, and they were cracked by a gang of people who actually developed driver's licenses and distributed them freely. These kind of things all indicate towards one thing. No program is ever secure. It's a myth to say that we have a foolproof program. Nothing is ever secure. What one can only do is to build processes and try and build security into the form factor that you hand over to the citizen. That's where we saw a lot happening around the world. Many countries are now revamping their entire systems which are archaic, outdated, and looking for means to actually grow their security standards. The other side, you look at banking, EMV standards have evolved. You've got people moving from MaxStripe to EMV because MaxStripe is not secure. Fraud in the US has been at a high, probably because they were always on MaxStripe. Now they're moving on EMV. But while there is fraud in the US, there is also fraud in Asia. And if you see, the trend is that fraud always is ahead of you. It's always ahead of you. The fraudster is always ahead of you. So you got to find ways, and now India is moving towards EMV. By 2017, all of the cards being issued will have to be EMV certified chip cards, not MaxDrive. With this will come responsibility. The responsibility of every card holder. How responsible is he? How does he use his card? What are the kind of security standards that will be there? How do you actually personalize those cards? How do you manufacture those cards? Is also an important thing. So there then comes the part of security of software that actually goes into digital certificates, for example. PKI, public key infrastructure. All of these technologies, when they converge, you create the ecosystem. And finally, you are able to deliver a secure, trusted identity which you can authenticate and you can rely upon, reliability. So it's a very powerful combination of physical and digital security. What I want to just quickly show here is, for example, you see the substrate that goes into the card. Different substrates have also got their own risks. It's not that every substrate has got the same level of risk. For example, polycarbonate is a standard that people have used in many countries where fraud is very high. They found it is harder to crack a card of polycarbonate when compared to PVC card. So this is one of the things we learned through our global experience. Then you look at the credentials. The credentials that you have are what you need to go in to the card. The chip. How does the chip go in? How do you personalize that? How secure is it? What kind of environment you make it? All of this is driven by processes. Any breach in these processes causes mistrust, and the system can be compromised. And lastly, the authenticity. How authentic is that person who actually holds that card? So whether it's a mobile or a card, all of these are common challenges. All I'm trying to draw this attention is that we have certain processes and standards to comply with. If any country that doesn't do that will be obviously prone to such kind of challenges. Take an example. This is a very interesting example. You see, I just wanted to show, you see one line on the passport, which is a kind of a curve. Why I'm showing this is because this is one of the ways in how you secure your identity. If you see that, if it's faked, you can make out it's faked if somebody tries to duplicate that. But the more levels of security you build into your documents and your systems, the higher the chances that you will not be compromised, that security will not be compromised. Same goes for national identity card. We did the first phase of the National Population Register for India. That was in 2010 and 11. It was a challenge. How do you get the data? How do you collect it? How authentic is that data? Where do you make sure that the data is matching with what you're personalizing? The entire process was written and documented and had to be followed to the last detail. Else, there could have been cards or there could have been identities which could have been compromised and could have fallen into the wrong hands. Driver's license is a less of a challenge, but when it comes to your main identity document, which is either a passport or a national ID card or a social security, this cannot be compromised. I'd just like to say that, we've tried to, as a company, Entrust Data Card, we've been moving ahead rapidly now. We acquired Entrust a couple of years back, and as an Entrust Data Card, if you see, we offer what we call as the authentication piece along with the identity management expertise. So it's really all about documentations, form factors, securing your citizens and the customers. So this is where we are today in the Magic Quadrant, moving up rapidly, and we hope to contribute to the society. In terms of number of customers that we serve across different verticals around the world. We're probably the top 20 in the banks in the financial world. We do all of them, government, and so on. So just to give it a sense that this is a specialization that needs to be maintained, and you have to be ahead of the fraudster, who will always be trying to find ways to crack and get ahead of you. A few of our elite customers, and we do this not just in India but around the world. Many of the programs which are run today effectively in passports, driver's licenses, or even in the space of identity management are from Entrust Data Card. I'd like Saurabh to come and explain a little bit more on this, expand on this.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Rajiv, for the wonderful insight. So the main thing that I'm going to do here today is just to say how inspired I am with the advent of the online and mobile commerce, which is continuously transforming the way we used to and way we now interact with our bank services, and be it the retail stores, the travel and lodging departments, or be it any sphere of our life. So this is what I would like to term as the Uberization of the society. So all of us sitting out here have been Uberized in one way or the other. So what is this Uberization? Uberization is actually delivering a product or service in a better way by finding out new ways to connect with our customers. We need to, the Uber approach says that it is actually a kind of redefinition of the traditional ways of doing business and connecting with people in new ways. So companies like Facebook, Amazon, Uber, Ola, so they're not only providing new products, but they're also finding out new ways to deliver the products to you, how to package them, how to deliver it. So effectively, all these companies can be rated as a disruptor. Disruptor in a way that it has created a tremendous disruption to the traditional ways of doing business, and now it has cut down the intermediaries. So all these companies have found out the new ways to interact directly with the customers now. So now the Uber approach, most of the companies have no idea what all challenges does it bring together with itself. So as per the Financial Times, which I was going through a couple of weeks back, it says that the world's biggest taxi company, Uber, doesn't own any vehicles of its own. The world's largest retailer, Alibaba, maintains no inventory of its own. Similarly, the world's biggest media company, that is Facebook, creates no content of its own. Still, they are touching each and every life sitting out here. So this is how our competitive disruption has been brought into the picture through the Uberization. So this Uberization is also bringing in the hidden challenges, or rather, let me put it in other words, say the opportunities masked in the form of a challenge. So at one end, the legacy concerns of around the security still to be there, and at the other end, the new growing concepts are raising real big concerns around the privacy and safety. For example, the buzzword of the industry these days, that is IoT, Internet of Things. So this soon going to be a big epidemic in the society. I think in order to tackle this IoT, we need yet another IoT just before that, and that is Internet of Thoughts. We all need to brainstorm a lot to classify the issues and diagnose what all issues together with the benefits could it bring in. Let me just touch upon a couple of interesting examples from the IoT space. An industrial system in Germany got compromised through one of the business applications, and that ultimately led to the suspension of its operations. That doesn't only mean that the manufacturing of the goods were stopped, but also the hacker was able to play around with the values in a way that it led to the explosion of a blast furnace. Another one, the infusion pump, looks something like this. Used to inject the medicines to the patient's bodies. These infusion pumps are generally share a common credential with no message integrity checks between the source and destination. So just imagine, if a hacker manages to compromise that piece of identity, then, and there is no message integrity checks, he would not only be able to control all the infusion pumps in the hospital, but could also again tweak the values that would ultimately lead to the overdose and underdose to the patients. There's a reason Food and Drugs Association Department has banned one such device recently. Just imagine, after a couple of days you identify that, okay, a hacking event has happened. What will be your first step as a hospital owner? I think the logical step says that you would instantly disconnect all the infusion pumps from the network so that the proliferation at least can be suspended immediately. But would it solve the problem? That's a food for thought. Because disconnecting the affected product would now require us to manually update all the drug libraries, which is even more scary. So all such things are a direct impact against the abuse of your identity. And 95% of such breaches comprises of the identity breach and compromising your credential. So what we need to solve all these things? Our recommendation says that we need one identity that can be used to build trust and secure our transactions, offers you a frictionless experience across multiple channels, and promotes a differentiated growth across new range of services. And that would be our trusted identity. Until now, we've seen that if we increase the security parameter for any solution, the usability gets impacted, the user experience gets impacted. And if you think about only the user experience, the security part of it gets compromised. But now, technologies are available using which you can strike a right balance between the usability and security aspects. One such piece of technology I would like to share is mobile push. It's the same piece of technology using which you get the Facebook notifications on your phone, the LinkedIn notifications, or maybe the WhatsApp notification. So it's pretty simple to use and can be used across omni-channel access, be it the mobile, online, ATM, call centers, or the branches. So let's now take a few quick minutes to go through some relevant use cases that using which you could harness the power of a mobile phone these days. Log into your mobile wallets and portals. It's a new way to touch each and every life. The mobile wallets, the mobile banking, which we generally come across every now and then. We know that we just cannot rely on username and password anymore. We need new ways to log into the mobile banking application because that is the most sensitive piece. How could it be done? Think about a solution wherein you need not remember any password whatsoever. You just specify your user ID and a notification will be sent on your mobile phone. You click on OK and you're into your applications. Pretty straight and simple. Another way, few of the organizations have approached us saying that we do not want to deal with many identities now. We are sick of it. We want our users not to remember anything but still get the optimum level of security. For that, another piece of technology comes out here which provides a totally frictionless experience maintaining the overall security posture of your organization. So using that, you could just sign into your banking application and a strong ID in the form of a certificate or OTP would travel back to your banking system, authenticate yourself, proves your identity, and you gain access to your banking, mobile banking. Think about yet another relevant use case that we generally come across about the digital signatures, on the go signings and approvals. How could it benefit us? It could benefit us in many ways. Like, for example, a credit card company is pushing an offer to you, and you can accept all those offers through your mobile phone. It gets legally bound to you. Another use case says that if I'm a user of yatra.com or I'm trying to purchase something from the merchant.com, but I do not want to register myself in order to prove my trustworthiness, what can be done is I could delegate the authentication part to some other identity provider, like my bank or my Facebook ID. So that organization will prove my trustworthiness to the merchant. And this could be handled in the same way. We can also talk about securing transactions to build trust and how can we transfer the funds in an authentic manner. How can we beat the card not present fraud? This is, just for information, it's the number one fraud. We know that with the transition from bank slips to EMV, we have been able to manage the card present frauds up to some extent, but the card not present fraud stays to be at a constant price. And the same piece of technology can be used to empower our customers to fight with the fraud head on. Because now we are making the decision making and the authorization process directly in the user's hands. The future says that the same mobile phone should be able to provide us the same level of security for withdrawing cashes from the ATM or making transactions at the POS terminals. Now, how about when no data connectivity is available, or the Wi-Fi, the organization's policy says that your BYOD is not allowed to connect to the Wi-Fi. How would you deal with the authentication or digital signing operations in that case? For that, a patent pending piece of technology could play a pivotal role, that is the QR codes. So when you try to log in to a portal, the user himself will opt for a manual mode of authentication, which would show up an encrypted code. You scan that QR code, get a glimpse of the transaction, what you're trying to do on your mobile set, and dynamic OTP will be shown to you. You can enter that OTP on your screen, and boom, you are into your application again. So it's actually a fascinating way of dealing with the day-to-day problems. In case mobile is not considered to be an option for any organization, then of course we have the QR codes, the USB token, the grid card, smart cards, OTP token, the soft, hard form. There are plenty other options. So we need to think about a solution that will provide us, that would act as an umbrella solution providing a myriad of options to authenticate to our day-to-day use cases. So in the end, the selection is about the ability, your ability, to transform the user's experience while strengthening the overall security posture. So I encourage each one of you to start developing a process to implement such systems in your organizations and see how it affects your business. So on behalf of my entire team, would like to thank you for being here today. And it was a real pleasure speaking with all of you. You could visit our booth, the Entrust Data Card booth out there, booth number 4. And I hope you'll get in touch with us in case anything that we can do for you. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv. Thank you, Saurabh. I would request the speakers to please limit the time limit. Now I would like to call upon for the next address Mr. Dr. David Williams, Director Policy, DSCI.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. I'm the last speaker of this session. I've been told to keep my remarks as brief as possible, so I will try to do so. By way of introduction, my name is Jared Rackle. I'm with BSA, the Software Alliance, where I head up the Asia Pacific policy operations for our organization based out of Singapore. I'd like to thank NASCOM and DSCI and all of the organizers for inviting me to provide this important, to make this presentation to this important gathering. This afternoon's sessions have been very interesting to me. We've heard concrete solutions from workforce to ID authentication. And then we've also heard at a slightly higher level from the president of NASCOM, some higher level policy prescriptions. So what I'd like to do in my presentation is just to describe some of the work that our organization has been doing to, on the one hand, understand the trends in cybersecurity policy development in the region and here in India, and also to briefly describe how we've been trying to be part of the solution. So first, very briefly, the Software Alliance. We are the trade association for the global software industry. We represent the world's most innovative software companies, many household names, Oracle, Autodesk, IBM, Microsoft, Symantec, Dell, and many others. We're a global organization. We're headquartered in Washington, D.C., but we have operations in around 60 countries around the world, including here in India. In fact, we have dedicated staff and offices in capital cities like Brussels, Tokyo, Beijing, here in New Delhi, and of course in Singapore, where I'm based. It's a very exciting time to be working for the software industry. As we've been hearing, it is essentially creating the foundation for an entirely new way of living our lives and conducting our business and governing our societies. All of our members are rapidly moving from what I might describe as traditional software delivery models. You may recall floppy disks and optical disks. We don't see those too much anymore. We are moving towards business models that involve services enabled over the internet, data analytics, cloud computing services, and the like. What that means is that in some ways our members are data service providers rather than traditional software publishers. But of course, the innovations that are coming from software are creating challenges that we've been talking about for the last 2 days. It's good to know that this is no longer considered a technology-specific backroom technical issue. These are issues that our presidents are talking about, our board members, our CEOs, and our companies are talking about. As we become more connected, as the productivity and economic gains that are going to come from that improve, as our lifestyles and our ability to disconnect and detether from the desks and from particular devices improve, our lives will get better. But with that comes the risk. of cybersecurity threats and increasingly significant impacts caused by cybersecurity. So that is why we decided to do a study. It was released earlier this year. It's just shown here, Asia Pacific Cybersecurity Dashboard. We also have a sister publication for the European Union. So the Asia Pacific Cybersecurity Dashboard analyzed 10 markets in the region and tried to understand essentially at what stage in the process of cybersecurity policy development these markets were at. Our methodology was to identify 25 specific criteria in 5 basic themes, which we call building blocks of cybersecurity capability. And we also looked at 6 additional criteria that we called, in a category we call additional cyber law indicators. So I'll run through a little bit about what we meant by these things, and then I'll dive into some of our results. Just a little bit more on the methodology. The methodology was essentially desktop-based research of these 10 countries in the region based on publicly available information. So at this point, I'd like to point out a caveat in this kind of research. Cybersecurity policy is, to some extent, necessarily sensitive, and so some of the relevant policies that governments are conducting or implementing may not be publicly available. That would lead to a no result if we asked a question, is there policy X, and it's not publicly available, even if there may be a policy that people in the know are aware of, but is not publicly available. The findings are good as of January 1st, 2015, so some time has passed since then, but I think the findings are still illustrative. The whole point of the study was not to rank countries or to shame countries. It was to provide a quick snapshot of where we think countries' legal and policy frameworks are at the time of the study, to provide some guidance or recommendations to governments around the region. So the building blocks of a strong legal cybersecurity framework, in our view, are as follows, and to some extent they stack upon one another. So the first main building block is to construct a solid legal foundation. What we mean by that is that governments need to invest the resources to come up with a clear and transparent cybersecurity strategy that is underpinned by law. These strategies should be transparent and available to the public. They should be practical. They should be flexible, risk-based. We all live in societies and circumstances of limited resources. We need to focus our attention on the most important threats and the threats that are likely to have the most important consequences. And last of all, we think that they should be technology neutral. We are seeing innovation happening rapidly in the cybersecurity space here in India, in the United States, in Europe, around the world. It does no good to a society to pick and choose particular technologies or licensing models and say these are the only solutions that we are going to choose to use. We think that it's important to keep the options wide open. The policy is the first step. The second step is to ensure that you have operational entities that can implement them. So a lot of countries, including India, have established things like computer emergency response teams, the CERTs, the CCERTs, and other organizations, task forces, these sorts of things. But the bottom line is that you need to have the boots on the ground. You need to have the people in place to actually implement these policies. Another fundamental building block is to ensure that these policies and the legal framework is engendering trust between different stakeholders. One important point that was mentioned earlier was the importance of private sector participation in cybersecurity policy development and implementation. We could not agree more. It is critical. Government communication with the private sector and back and forth, whether it's incident response and breach notifications or whether it's collaborating on policy developments, developing standards, these are all critically important. But it's more than that. We need to encourage the private sector to be communicating with one another. We need to be encouraging governments to be communicating to one another. We need to find a way where we can share information on the threats as they're emerging without sacrificing important principles such as the privacy of individual user information. But we need to create mechanisms that will allow us to learn as the threats emerge, rather than, as someone mentioned earlier, companies or countries keeping the information under wraps, in part perhaps because of concerns about reputational consequences or because of legal barriers to sharing such information. So public-private partnerships are critical, and international discussions amongst governments are critical. I think both of these are happening, and that's good, but more needs to be done. Excuse me. Another area, and this is an area that I'll demonstrate later, is we're a little bit far behind in the Asia-Pacific region, is to create sector-specific strategies. So as a general matter, you want a transparent, flexible, risk-based approach that could apply to as much of the enterprises and economic sectors and government agencies as possible. Unnecessary divergence is not helpful. Most of our members that provide security solutions provide them to many different sectors, so you don't want the situation to fragment, but it's common sense that certain sectors are going to have different needs, and it's important for governments and the affected stakeholders to be thinking about what those specific needs are and build those into clear policies that can be implemented. And finally, and again this was touched on in at least two of the earlier presentations, improving education and awareness. Everything from building the workforce, raising the awareness amongst senior policy leaders and senior executives and companies that might not normally think about these issues, all the way down to encouraging greater participation in the workforce by inspiring our young people, including young women. So the results of analyzing that, and I apologize, this is terrible, terrible image, but if you do happen to go to our website and look at the document, right in the middle, fold out middle page, is the summary of our findings all in one nice little image. We use green check marks for yes responses to our questions, blue half moons for partial or in progress, and red X's for nope, doesn't exist, at least not publicly available, and more work needs to be done. It's hard to see, but India is among the 10 countries in the list there, is third from your left. And so you can kind of just look down the list. I'm not going to go through each of these criteria, but you can kind of see the X's and the checks and et cetera. The sector-specific section, see if this, where all the red is, that's the sector-specific. So most of the countries in the region have not done a lot on sector-specific. To some extent that makes sense, because you need to build the strong basic frameworks before you can start doing the sector-specific issues. At least that's the better way of doing it, because otherwise the different sectors are going to start fragmenting without more central guidance, I would say. So here in India, I'm not going to take a lot of time because I think you all are probably more familiar with what's going on here in India than I am, but what we found is that India's making great strides in the cybersecurity policy space. But there's still plenty of work to be done. In 2013, India's government published the National Cybersecurity Policy, but it's not underpinned by a strong legal foundation, and from what I've heard, there's been not enough implementation of that policy. So the fact that it's there is good, but I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of operationalizing it. India, like a lot of other countries in the region, has established operational entities. The CERT was created in 2004, and it's good to see the kinds of work that the CERT is doing and wants to be doing, including in partnership with the private sector. So we really applaud that effort. Public-private partnerships. Again, we've heard about some of the ways in which the Indian government is working with the private sector, and that is all good. It's called for under the cybersecurity strategy, but there's still a lack of sort of formal, explicit participation of the private sector, including the global companies, in the policy development. Now, we recognize that some of the cybersecurity discussions are necessarily going to be sensitive and internal, but where possible, we need to create more effective leveraging of the private sector's global and technical experience to inform government policymaking. Sector-specific cybersecurity plans. India, like most of the countries in the region, has not done enough in that area, although I think there are efforts underway to try to develop the capabilities. Most of the countries in the region are recognizing that cybersecurity is important and working to improve education and awareness, so that is good. And then this last bucket, it's kind of the negative list, the additional cyber law indicators. We are happy that India has so far avoided many of what we think are the pitfalls to good cybersecurity policy. However, there are barriers to incentivizing investment in some aspects of India's technology market, including what we think are, in some cases, unnecessary India-specific testing and certification requirements when there are available international standards. What that does is it raises the cost and the barriers for entry into the market. And frankly, for domestic companies who are designing their products and systems around those domestic standards, it then makes it harder for them to go global because they then have to re-engineer their approaches in the global marketplace as well. I'm going to be very brief on this, but basically India's experience is pretty much the average experience within the region. As a region, compared to Europe and North America, we're a little bit behind in terms of the establishing the clear and transparent policies and legal frameworks. We are missing out on really leveraging the public-private sector partnerships, but we are in some ways ahead in terms of establishing operational entities and promoting educational awareness. I want to leave you all with something to think about, I hope. So in the region, we see a lot of what we call these stumbling blocks that could undermine the investment in good cybersecurity policy. We are constantly urging governments from the United States to Europe to countries around the region to avoid imposing unnecessary and unreasonable requirements in this context. Working with the private sector to come up with practical solutions is much better than coming up with a highly prescriptive administrative compliance type approach. We also need to avoid, and I just mentioned this, manipulating or utilizing standards and certification processes to erect barriers. The fewer participants in the market, the less choice the market has. Data localization rules can undermine security. Sometimes that's seen as counterintuitive, but a lot of the important technologies and services that are provided by some of our members are informed by what's happening in other parts of the world. Information has to, as a general matter, flow freely across international borders for us to be able to leverage the economies of scale. And finally, we want to encourage governments to avoid preferences for particular technologies. What I want to leave you with is that BSA as an organization, we bring to the table a global perspective. We're not just thinking about this from an India perspective. We're dealing with these issues as they come up in Europe or in the United States, on the Hill and in the FBI and other places. We work extensively with all the major economies in the region. So we'd like to present ourselves as a resource both to our industry association partners like DSCI and NASCOM, whom we've got a great relationship with, and to the government officials and to individual companies in the market who are interested in working with us and bringing to bear that global perspective that can help create a stable and effective cybersecurity policy framework. Because it was mentioned in one of the first, I think, sets of remarks, this is a global problem. one country going it alone, and especially if they're diverging from international trends, is not going to be able to solve the problem on its own. Even a country as big and as dynamic as India is going to have a challenge with that. It's certainly the experience of the United States. So anyway, I want to thank everyone again, especially the organizers, for putting on this incredible program, and for you all for politely listening to my remarks. I hope you found them useful, and I'm very glad to be here. Thank you very much.